Hey there everybody, Joe here. Thanks for tuning in. I want to take you to the job site where I painted these manatees in little Jordan's room and show you my preferred method of transferring my smaller painting onto a larger surface. I just use a grid like anybody else, but there's a few shortcuts that I think you might find helpful. So I do a painting because that helps me troubleshoot on a small scale, and I've talked about this before, but it helps me iron out all of the colors that I want to use in my picture before I get on that large scale. I think a lot of the reason that artists who email me and are frustrated and exhausted is a lot of the time just because it's such an exhausting process to make mistakes on a large scale. You want to make all the mistakes on a small scale. Post it on Facebook like I do and see what everybody thinks. You'll definitely get a lot of opinions. And you'll see my buddy Dwayne Koyawena giving me a hand with this job. So I hope you enjoy it and find some valuable tips in there. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is get this sketch transferred onto my big wall. So the way that I'm going to do that accurately, and this might be a logo, some kind of an emblem. It's not always a painting. You know, this could be whatever small picture, maybe a photograph. All I did was draw a grid on it. Now that grid can have as many squares as you like. All I did was draw a line right along the top of this manatee, right along the bottom of this, and then I just divided it up. And so now I have this grid that is small enough squares that I'm real confident that I can put all of my lines in the right places. So the thing that you're going to find is probably the easiest method for following a grid like this is, first of all, you reproduce the same number of squares on your wall as big as you want the picture, and then what you're going to pay attention to is where lines intersect. It's kind of hard to keep an eye on, and I'll explain this more as I go. It's kind of hard to keep an eye on where a line is somewhere in the middle of a square, but it's very easy to see where they intersect any of these lines. And so that'll be the way I use this grid effectively. So I've got 5 squares across the top, I've got 3 squares down. So I need to produce a 5x3 grid on this wall, and I'm just going to do that with masking tape, because why put pencil lines that I'm just going to have to paint over when I can accomplish the same thing with tape. So now the way I do this grid more accurately with tape is I just make myself a little guide. Rather than pulling out a tape measure and measuring each square, you know, it's really easy just to get one square where I like it, and then I measure the distance of this one. And so as I'm coming down, we're doing the horizontal pieces of tape now, so we did it according to the length of this piece of tape. And then I can just take that tape over after I stick this side to it, and then I put it on this side, and then when I get those two distances, I know that this tape is parallel with that first one. And then I also have a distance for my square, which we also used when we measured these horizontal pieces. So it's the same. So I know these are square now. So now we'll come down and do the next row in the same way. I've got this distance, so I'll just get my piece of tape. And if Dwayne wasn't helping me here, and I had to do it on my own, I would just tack this on right there, right at that height. And then I would put it on firm enough that I can pull this out. And then I would take my piece of tape. Let's just put that on hold right there. I would put this piece of tape on the other side. And to me, this is much quicker than trying to get pencil lines in the exact right place and then having to erase them if I mess up, then having to paint over them when I'm finished. Just put this here. It's going to be very easy to fill in the spots where the tape was after I pull this tape off, as opposed to trying to get rid of unwanted pencil lines. Oh, and that's the last one. So now all I have to do is see how close we were on the 3x5 rectangle, because this one hasn't been measured, so that bottom is most likely off. Oh man, is that close. I can just leave it. Look how close we were on our 3x5 rectangle. I mean, that's literally like less than a 1/16 of an inch off. Let's see if the right side is as good. That is lucky. But see, it's nice to be able to check your work. So here, I'm a whole inch off, so I'll pull off this right side, keep that left one where it is, and then I know that that's square. Just put it right there. Now we're ready to do our sketch of the manatees on the wall. Now let's do some Q&A from last week. So here on last week's video, we have Oso Panda. Hi Joe, thank you for your videos. I'm from Colombia, South America. I don't understand glazing and painting in layers. Example, in human painting faces. Could you please give me a clue? To me, when I hear terms that I hardly know what they mean, glazing has been explained to me, but like I said, I don't have any official schooling, and so I might be wrong on my understanding of what glazing is, but fancy techniques are no replacement for just getting the right color in the right place. Now, I'm going to tell you what I think glazing is, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but when I faux glaze a wall, I put layers of color over layers, and so using layers over layers to achieve colors that you wouldn't produce just by opaque layers of paint. I've seen a lot of glazing where an artist is putting lighter colors over darker colors. When you do that, you can get a lot of variations in colors, but to me that it doesn't have that much value, because I'm not achieving, even though it might be making more complex gradients of colors, I don't feel like I'm in that much control of it, and it's not producing colors that I can't just mix if I'm doing light over dark. Now if you do dark colors over light, that's different. You put a dark color over a light color, it backlights it, just like a flashlight through your hand in a dark room. Well, so when you do that, you get a more intense color, like I've done in some of my older videos. You can watch the video where I'm painting the Bigfoot in the beer cave, and I use an airbrush and I layer the airbrush colors over pure white in order to get a more intense color. Well, so in painting skin tone, you might water down or use some kind of thinner linseed oil or a mix of fancy thinners and oils and reducers, I don't know, and get a real thin layer of color and put it over. But that is going to give you some cool intense colors. But again, I think job one is just getting the right colors in the right places that you can just produce by mixing those fancy techniques. So they're a cool way to enhance an already great painting, but they're not going to make a painting that's not great look great all of a sudden. I don't think so. I've never had that experience. D. Waller says, are you using water-based house paints? Yes, I am. Never heard of painting on a drop cloth. Why not muslin? I don't know what muslin is. Drop cloths are cheap. It's a great way to do a cheap mural for a client. I mean, a giant drop cloth, 15 feet by 12 feet, only 30 bucks. It's got a ton of cornstarch in it, so you might have to wash it out and steam it and do a little bit of labor to get it prepared. But I mean, whatever, it's a great canvas. I wouldn't use it for small things. It has real heavy texture, the little knots, it's not as even and finely knitted as the canvases that are specifically made for painting. But I think it's really cool. You can just get a giant drop cloth, cut it up, and make paintings for cheap. And God bless you too, D. Waller. Mind Gem says, I know that one of the hardest things to learn is the hue and how to get it right. Can you elaborate your philosophy on how to get the right hue on, say, the lighted side compared to the shadow side? I honestly don't think that it's one of the hardest things, so I only mean that as encouragement, disregarding how dark or how light or how gray it is. Where is it on the rainbow? Where is it between red and orange and yellow, and then green, blue, violet? Where is it on that order of colors that you see in the rainbow? That's what I think of hue. So is it a violet hue? I identify that first in every color, in every shade of gray. I think what color I see in that, if it's very muted. Okay, so on my computer screen I have over here this really gray tone, and I immediately see a slightly violet hue in that. And I don't know if it's coming out the same on the screen. It's just, for example, an object, I just decide what the object is, and I try to explain this in all my videos. And in sunlight, which is going to show all the colors that are in that object, I just make the brightest version of that color that I want. So if I'm painting a red apple, I'm just going to use my really bright red and maybe add a little bit of yellow and white to really brighten it up. like sunlight's hitting it. But then once I get my brightest color, then I'll take that color and then I'll consider what it's going to look like if I take away some of the brightness of the white light that's bringing out the current color. So that means that it's going to get darker. No hue change yet. So you just imagine, we're thinking of the shadowed side, so you just take away some of the brightness, some of the intensity, and keep the hue the same. This is my process. And then the next thing I think is, what other light is in my picture? Is there a blue sky? Is there a big green leaf that could be reflecting? Remember that everything in the picture is a light, and that's why you can see anything, is because it's functioning as a light. Whatever else is in my picture, sometimes I'll just think, well, it's a foresty scene, so there's going to be a lot of green. I'm not considering every single object. And if there's dark objects, they're not going to reflect much color onto the shadow. So that shadow usually is affected most by the color of the sky, which tends to be some blue or violet shade. You just consider the exact color that's coming from the sky, and then know what the color will make when the object color and your light source color combine. So blue sky on a red apple is going to make a different kind of violet than what you'll get if you just mix the two colors of paint together. So always consider what the two lights make when they mix. That's why on the last few videos I've talked about mixing light. You can become just as familiar with that color wheel as you can with the paint color wheel. It's just a matter of memorizing. Okay, Kenneth Fish has a great question about pricing, and I'm super excited that she's getting people asking about her talents. That's great news. So yeah, then the next step is how do you price things so that you don't get yourself in trouble? Well, I price things by the hour, and for a long time I priced at 30, and then it was 40 an hour, then it was 50 an hour, and it's really different from town to town. So big cities tend to have a more thriving economy, and people tend to be more in the market to spend money on things that are like a mural that is not as necessary as other things. In my little mountain town, it's really hard to find very many people that want to do that. So it really depends where you live, so be sensitive to what your environment's like. Well, the way I've done it, and I think that this is a good way, you tell your client that you charge this much per hour. I charge 50 an hour. Now you know as the artist that you're actually only making 40 an hour. You have to know that so you don't get frustrated. So you know that you're only going to make 40 an hour. You know that your actual real rate is 40 an hour, but you say 50. And you don't tell your customer, well, my real rate's 40, but I'm saying that it's 50. No, you don't say that. You just know that you're actually coming out at 40. So you make your rate higher than what it actually is. The reason you do that is because you always want that extra time on the end of the job to go above and beyond and not be frustrated that you're not making enough money. So you bid it for 80 hours, it's 2 weeks, and then you get it done, but maybe you spend an extra 20 hours at the end, and you've bid it at 50 an hour, but when you spend that extra 20 hours on it, it's going to bring you down to, I don't know if that's actually going to bring you down to 40 an hour, but I'm just saying that's how I did it for a long time, I would always just say it was a higher hourly rate than what I knew I was actually making. Just a word of advice. If you don't know how many hours that it's going to take you, you tell your client, I'll get back to you tomorrow with the price. You don't have to say it right there in the moment, but if you can't figure it out, then don't take that job because you don't have enough experience to be efficient and make yourself a living. But there's nothing wrong with taking something for the learning experience. You just have to know that you're the one that's going to end up paying. And I did a lot of that. Here's a good question. Alan Salgado says, I find myself having trouble sketching a painting using paint instead of pencil. I need to use pencil to sketch a painting before I start getting my colors ready. or my painting doesn't look that good. Hey, I do better with pencil too. I just use really watered down paint to sketch, like on the last video when I was outlining with paint. You got to make sure you water that down a lot, or else, like some of the people said, it will show through your painting. And no, you don't have to do it like me. That's just something I'm comfortable doing. But all my life, I drew out my ideas with pencil, and I feel like I think in pencil, but once I have the idea sketched, I'll go to paint. If I draw with pencil, I'll do it on paper and then just transfer it. There's no need to draw, for me, a big mural with pencil on the wall just to cover it up with paint. So whatever you're comfortable with. I prefer putting pencil on a small paper and then using a grid to transfer it. I don't think it's necessary for anyone to do things just like me. It's just where my comfort zone is. The paint, when I use it, I'm putting it on the canvas and mixing it on the canvas. And that method is my method that I'm really comfortable with. I've never seen anybody else do that very successfully. And I don't know why that's especially easy for me to do it that way, but it's not necessary. That's not the way to paint pictures that look nice. That's just the way that I'm really comfortable, because I see the color right against the color. And to keep it from, it does pile up, on video you don't see the details, but a lot of times I do have trouble with texture. And I'm like, oh man, I scratch it with my thumbnail, maybe sand it a little bit because it started building up too much and I don't like the look of it. That can't happen. I'll strategize more if I really need the texture to be smoother. And then the other answer to that is that I just work fast. Being very familiar with what colors are going to do ahead of time and what I need to do to get them where they need to be, and being able to accomplish it fast helps me. Now, I'm not really as fast as the videos make it look, just in case you were wondering. Maurice Ford says, "Hi Joe, much love and respect from Barbados. I just want to say thanks for sharing all these tips and insights." Thank you very much for that, Maurice. It's a very nice compliment and an encouraging report. I love to hear when things are going well, because I get emails when things are going bad and it makes me feel terrible. I really feel that when artists are having trouble or in the middle of a job causing stress. I really love the success reports. Okay, I'm going to stop there, and I hope you enjoyed the video. As you're watching this, I'm probably in Knoxville, Tennessee, putting that Jesus Resurrection mural up, so I'll be excited to show the finished product. I can't reveal that online until I give it to the clients. Don't want to ruin the surprise. So I'll be eager to show that to you next week. And so thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.